As the car drove on, she clasped her hands in her lap, silent. Her mind filled with questions. Where was he taking her? What did he really want? And why choose her, of all the people on that street? The suspense only grew. The man glanced at her, noticing her nervousness. "There's no need to be afraid," he said calmly. "You're safe now." The words echoed within her, but there was still a mixture of doubt and hope. Could it really be true? The girl remembered her mother's words, "God always sends help at the right time." Was this the moment? Was this man the answer to a silent prayer, amidst tears and the cold? Her faith was beginning to grow stronger again. The car passed through brighter streets, and she saw restaurants and families dining. The smell of food seemed to permeate the vehicle, awakening her hunger even more. The girl couldn't imagine what would happen when they reached their destination. But she knew her life was about to change. He remained silent for a few minutes, focused on driving. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was as if each second was part of a preparation for something greater. She felt deep down that this path had a hidden purpose. When the car finally slowed down, she realized they were stopping in front of an unexpected place. It wasn't a fancy restaurant, nor a simple house. It was something different, something that left her confused and curious at the same time. Her eyes widened at the sight. The girl's breath caught once more. Something told her that what was about to happen would be much more than just satisfying her hunger. And in that moment, with her heart pounding, she realized her life would never be the same after that night. The black car glided through the streets like a silent shadow. The city lights reflected off its shiny bodywork, creating an aura of mystery. To the girl, the vehicle seemed to belong to another world, a world far removed from the poverty and pain she knew so well. She leaned her forehead against the cold window, watching each street pass by. It was as if she were crossing an invisible bridge between her past suffering and something new she didn't yet understand. Her heart was beating so fast she felt like she could hear it. The man, intent on driving, glanced discreetly at the girl. There was a silent concern in his eyes, but also something indecipherable. Who was he? Why had such a different man stopped that particular night? The suspense only grew. The car's interior smelled sweetly of leather and polished wood. Every detail seemed too sophisticated for a child accustomed to the dust of the streets. She felt small, out of place, yet protected at the same time. It was as if she were inside a strange cocoon. Outside, the city went about its normal routine. People crossed pedestrian crossings, families laughed in restaurants, couples walked hand in hand. Everything seemed far removed from the reality she had just experienced on the cold sidewalk. It was as if she were in another universe. He broke the silence suddenly. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated for a few seconds before answering softly. The name sounded delicate, almost lost in the air. The man repeated it aloud, as if trying to commit every syllable to memory. There was something tender in the way he spoke her name, as if the sound held a special meaning. The girl was surprised by the feeling of being remembered, of being seen as a real person. It was a rare sensation, one that warmed her insides. The car passed a park illuminated by small golden lights. Children ran after illuminated kites. The girl watched in silence, with a mixture of nostalgia and longing. The scene brought back memories of better times, when her life still had color. The man noticed her gaze fixed on the park and said softly, "You'll smile like that again, too." The sentence fell upon her like an unexpected promise. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from sadness. There was a new glow. She wondered who this man really was. A wealthy businessman? A simple, kind-hearted stranger? Or perhaps someone with a greater mission? With every mile she drove, her mind filled with unanswered questions. And each question seemed to open a new cycle of curiosity. The soft sound of the radio filled the air. An old song, one of those that speak of hope and faith, played softly. The girl closed her eyes for a moment and let the melody lull her thoughts. It was as if God were telling her there was still a path for her. She opened her eyes and realized the man was watching her expression. He didn't say anything, but his gaze conveyed understanding. Sometimes silence speaks louder than 1,000 words. And in that moment, the girl felt less alone in the world. With every turn, Anxiety grew within her. Would he take her to a restaurant? To a house? To some place she didn't know? The anticipation was so intense that her fingers clasped nervously in her lap. Anticipation gripped her heart. The black car drove steadily, as if it knew exactly where it was going. The girl sensed that this destination held something greater than just a hot meal. It was as if she were about to discover a whole new chapter in her life. The man adjusted the rearview mirror and, in a calm voice, said, "You don't need to worry anymore. What happened so far won't define who you will be tomorrow." Those words felt like a balm to her soul. How could someone who barely knew her understand so much? She looked out the window and saw the full moon reflected in the river that ran through the city. The scene looked like a hand-painted painting, so beautiful it took her breath away. It was as if nature itself was confirming that something divine was happening that night. Suddenly, the car slowed. The girl held her breath, imagining they had reached their destination. But instead of stopping, he simply slowed down and looked at her again. There was something deep and purposeful in his eyes. "Do you believe that God never makes mistakes?" the man asked, almost as if it were a confidence. The girl fell silent, surprised by the question. Within her, a memory of her mother resonated. Even in suffering, he is still in control. Perhaps that was the answer. The car sped off again, and she realized the journey wasn't over yet. The destination seemed increasingly mysterious. But strangely, the girl felt less fear and more confidence. As if she were ready for what was to come. She wondered if, in the future, she would remember that night as the beginning of everything. After all, the black car wasn't just transportation. It was a symbol of change, an open door to a new story still being written. As she watched the city through the window, the girl noticed the landscape beginning to change. The busy streets were gone, giving way to wider, quieter avenues. The car seemed to be taking her not just to a physical place, but to a new chapter in her life. Her breathing grew deeper and deeper. Something in the air carried a silent anticipation, as if before a great event. Each passing streetlight seemed to set the pace to a new melody in her heart. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment and said a small, silent prayer. She asked for the courage to face what lay ahead. She also prayed that, if this was truly a divine plan, she might understand why she was there. The car drove down a tree-lined road, lit only by the moon. The girl felt like she was in a fairy tale, being whisked away to a magical place, unknown, yet full of possibilities. The gentle wind blew against the window, lulling her thoughts. The man, still firmly at the wheel, seemed to know the route well. He wasn't using GPS, he didn't show any hesitation. It was as if he were guided by something greater than simple directions. The girl watched him silently, trying to decipher who he really was. Suddenly, on the horizon, a lit-up building began to appear. Her eyes widened at the sight. It was nothing like what she had imagined. Her heart raced again, and her breath caught in her chest. The black car then slowed, approaching that mysterious place. The girl, her heart racing, prepared to discover what awaited her behind those gates. And little did she know, the true beginning was yet to come. The black car finally stopped in front of a brightly lit building surrounded by well-kept gardens. The girl's eyes widened, unsure whether to be frightened or amazed. She had never been in such an imposing place. Her heart seemed to leap in her chest. The man turned off the engine, turned to her, and said calmly, "I want to show you something." His voice held mystery, but also kindness. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the door handle as if deciding between fear and courage. The silence hung heavy in the air. He then opened the car door for her, extending his hand once more. There was something almost paternal in his gesture. The girl, still unsure, allowed herself to be guided. Her small footsteps echoed on the stone floor as if announcing the beginning of a new journey. As they approached the entrance, the girl noticed enchanting details: flower pots, a porch lit by soft lamps, the distant sound of laughter coming from inside. The scene was so different from the icy street where she had been minutes ago that it felt like a dream. When they reached the door, the man stopped and looked at her seriously. "This isn't just a house. It's a place where lives are transformed." The words made him even more enigmatic. The girl didn't know what to think, but a flame of hope lit within her. The door opened slowly, revealing a welcoming interior. The smell of home-cooked food filled the air, making the girl's stomach growl loudly. The man smiled discreetly at her innocent reaction. It was as if every detail had been prepared for this moment. She took a few hesitant steps inside. The floor gleamed, the furniture simple but cozy. Everything there exuded peace, as if it were a home, not just a building. Her curious eyes roamed every corner, trying to absorb this new world. Suddenly, a woman appeared in the hallway, wearing a warm expression. She greeted the man naturally, as if she'd known him for a long time. When her eyes fell on the girl, they widened in surprise and tenderness. "Who is this precious thing?" she asked. The man replied calmly, "Someone who needs us." Those words sounded like music to the girl, who had always felt invisible. For the first time in a long time, someone called her needed, not bothersome. Her eyes filled with unshed tears. The lady approached with soft steps, bent down before the girl, and caressed her face. "Are you hungry, dear?" The lump in her throat prevented her from answering, but the sparkle in her eyes said it all. The lady smiled and motioned for her to follow her. They went to the kitchen, where a lavish table was set. Hot dishes, fresh bread, and colorful fruits filled the room with an irresistible aroma. The girl could hardly believe this food was for her. She felt like running, but she remained standing, confused. The man, sensing her hesitation, spoke firmly, "Sit down, little one. You're welcome here." It was the first time in a long time she'd heard such a phrase. Her legs trembled, but finally she pulled out a chair and timidly sat down at the table. When he took his first bite, tears fell silently. The simple taste of rice, beans, and meat seemed like the best feast in the world. With each bite, it was as if a part of his pain was healed. The man watched in silence, as if he understood the value of that moment. As she ate, the woman sat beside her and asked softly, "Where did you come from, dear?" The girl lowered her eyes, avoiding talking about her pain. The man gently interrupted, "We don't need to talk about that now. Today she just needs to rest and feel safe." The girl looked at him, surprised by the protectiveness in his words. No one had ever bothered to spare her painful memories. She felt, for the first time, that she didn't need to justify her existence. Just being there was enough. After the meal, the lady led her to a simple but welcoming room. There was a soft bed, clean blankets, and a small lamp beside it. To someone who had slept so many nights on the cold floor, the room felt like a palace. The girl's heart nearly burst with gratitude. As she lay down, she pressed the pillow against her face, breathing in the fresh scent of the fabric. She'd never felt anything so comfortable. She closed her eyes for a few seconds, but her thoughts returned to the mysterious man. Who was he really? Why was he doing all this? Shortly afterward, the man entered the room and stood in front of the door. His gaze was firm, but there was an undeniable tenderness. "You can rest easy," he said. "But tomorrow I want to show you something even more special." These words left the girl restless and curious. Anxiety gripped her. What could be more special than warm food and a soft bed? That promise seemed to open a new door in her imagination. It was as if her life was about to take on new meaning. The man then said goodbye, gently turned off the light, and closed the door. But before he left, he gave her one last look, filled with something the girl couldn't decipher. There was a secret there, a truth yet to be revealed. In the silence of the room, the girl couldn't sleep. Every detail of the night came back to her mind like a movie. The black car, the lit-up house, the unexpected dinner, the mysterious promise. Each scene seemed to lead her to a greater destiny. She turned over in bed, staring at the moonlit ceiling streaming through the window. She closed her eyes and said a silent prayer. She asked for strength, for courage, and most of all, for understanding the purpose of this encounter. She felt that none of it was by chance. Sleep finally came slowly, bringing colorful dreams she hadn't seen in a long time. She dreamed of a different life, where she could run freely, smile without fear, and have someone to call her family. Her heart was awakening to a new hope. As he slept, the house remained silent. The man sat in the living room, reflecting in deep silence. His eyes were fixed on an old photograph on the mantelpiece. There was a hidden pain there, a past that still haunted him. Something he saw in that girl touched him deeply. He sighed, as if carrying an invisible weight. Maybe it wasn't just compassion that had made him stop the car that night. Maybe it was something bigger, an answer to his own prayers. Fate seemed to intertwine two stories that should never have crossed paths, but instead did. It was late afternoon, and a cold wind blew through the streets of a small American town. Amidst lit storefronts and hurried people, a skinny girl with messy hair and hopeful eyes clutched her empty stomach. Each step was heavy, as if hunger had robbed her of her strength. No one seemed to notice her presence. She gazed at shop windows filled with fresh bread, apple pies, and steaming soups. The delicious aroma wafted through the glass, making her heart race. But at the same time, the memory of being penniless cut her deeply. How could such a small child carry such a heavy burden? The street was cruel, but still she hoped. Have you ever felt like no one really saw you? That's exactly what she felt on that sidewalk. If you enjoy stories that touch the heart and make us reflect, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss the next chapters of this journey that promises to surprise you in unexpected ways. At that moment, she extended her hand to an elegant lady passing by. Her voice was shaky, almost a whisper. "Please, could you give me a piece of bread?" The woman glanced at her quickly, sighed deeply, but continued on. The sound of the lady's heels echoed, and the emptiness inside her seemed to scream louder. Cars sped by, and she felt invisible amidst the hustle and bustle of the city. Children her age laughed across the street, emerging from an ice cream shop with colorful cones. The girl smiled for a moment, but it quickly faded. Life had taken away her right to be a child too soon. She remembered her mother, who always said, "God never abandons the little ones." Those words echoed within her, like a fragile thread of hope. It was the only thing keeping her feet firmly on the ground. Even with tears in her eyes, she believed something different could happen. To each person who passed, the girl repeated her request. Some looked away, others pretended not to hear, and some even murmured something impatient. But within her, faith persisted. Perhaps someone, amidst so much indifference, could reach out with true compassion? The streetlights began to come on, and the cold grew ever more biting. She pulled her old, torn coat closer to her, trying to keep warm. Her stomach growled loudly, betraying her hunger. Time seemed to slow down for those who were only waiting for a gesture of kindness. Far down the sidewalk, she saw a bakery closing. The baker was collecting the last trays of bread for the day. For a second, she considered running over and begging. But the fear of hearing another "no" paralyzed her. Sometimes the pain of rejection is stronger than the pain of hunger. She then sat in a corner, near a streetlight. Her head bowed, her eyes filled with tears. People continued to pass by, too preoccupied with their own worries. But amidst all that heavy silence, something different was about to happen. The rumble of a deep engine broke the monotony of the street. A shiny black car approached slowly. Its headlights illuminated the girl's tired face, and she looked up in surprise. Something inside her told her that this moment would change everything. Her breath caught in her chest. The car parked a few meters away. The sound of the door opening echoed like thunder in her soul. Who could own such an elegant car on such a simple street? Her heart raced in a way she had never felt before. Her eyes widened when she saw a male figure get out of the car. He was tall, well-dressed, with an enigmatic look in his eyes. He didn't look like the other people rushing past. There was something different about his posture. Something that made her believe it wasn't just a coincidence. And suddenly, the silence was broken by firm footsteps. He was walking straight toward her. Each step seemed to carry a mystery, a promise of change. The girl felt her heart beat even faster. Would he be another one who would ignore her? Or was something new about to happen? She didn't know whether to get up or remain there, curled up on the floor. Her hands trembled with nervousness, her eyes bright with curiosity. With every second, the anticipation grew. The man approached, and the world seemed to hold its breath along with the girl. The girl's eyes never left his. There was something intense in that serious gaze, yet at the same time filled with compassion. The man stopped right in front of her, bent down slightly, and in a firm tone, asked, "Is everything okay, little one?" His voice sounded a mixture of authority and tenderness. She tried to answer, but her voice faltered. She simply shook her head. Cold, hunger, and fear mingled in a knot that was difficult to untangle. The man watched her silently, as if seeking to understand more than his words could convey. It was as if he saw into her soul. The girl's hands were cold. She hid them inside her torn coat, embarrassed. This stranger seemed different from anyone she'd ever met. But in her heart, there was still a painful question. Why would someone like him stop to talk to someone like her? He opened his jacket and pulled out a wallet. The girl's eyes widened, thinking he was just going to give her some change. But that wasn't what happened. Instead of offering money, he held out his hand. "Come with me. No one should go hungry like this," he said, firmly and gently. Her heart raced with fear and hope at the same time. The streets had taught her to be wary of strangers. But there was something different about his voice, something reminiscent of the stories her mother had told her about angels sent by God. What if it was a sign? She hesitated for a few seconds. She looked around, as if searching for a way out or confirmation. The man waited patiently, unhurriedly, as if knowing a decision couldn't be forced. And in that instant, the girl realized she had nothing left to lose. With a deep sigh, she reached out her small hand for his. The touch was warm, firm, and yet comforting. It felt like, for the first time in a long time, someone truly cared. A shiver ran through her, not of fear, but of hope. The man smiled slightly, a small but sincere smile. Without letting go of her hand, he said, "We'll find you something to eat." Those words were music to her ears. She couldn't remember the last time she'd heard such a simple yet powerful promise. People passing by looked at her curiously. Some frowned, others whispered to each other. But none of that mattered. For the girl, that moment felt like the world had stopped. Finally, someone had seen her pain. As they walked together to the car, she couldn't tell if she was dreaming or experiencing a miracle. Her heart was still pounding, but now it was with excitement. What was waiting for her inside that black car? And, above all, who was that man? The soft leather seat felt strange as she climbed into the vehicle. She was used to sitting on the cold pavement, not in a luxury car. The contrast between her life and this environment was so stark it almost took her breath away. But there was something comforting about it. He started the engine gently and said simply, "Trust me." The girl looked out the window, watching the familiar streets fade away. With every meter they drove away, it was as if she were leaving a piece of her pain behind. Something new was beginning, but she didn't yet know what. Outside, the wind blew gently, as if the night itself were witnessing this unexpected beginning. Nothing would ever be the same again. Not for the girl, nor for the mysterious man. Life was about to reveal secrets that would change everything forever. The morning sun streamed through the cracks in the curtains, illuminating the room with a soft glow. The girl opened her eyes slowly, as if still unsure if all this was real. For a moment, he thought he was still on the streets. But the warmth of the blanket proved otherwise. She stood slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the gardens were covered in dew, reflecting the golden light of dawn. Birds sang in chorus, and the scene seemed straight out of a painting. It was hard to believe that this was where she was now. The bedroom door opened with a soft creak. The lady from the day before appeared with a warm smile. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" The girl nodded shyly, speechless. She wasn't used to so much affection first thing in the morning. The woman brought a tray with hot milk, homemade bread, and fresh fruit. "Before anything else, you need to start the day well fed," she said tenderly. The girl looked at the food as if it were a treasure. She had never started the day with something so simple, yet so special. As she ate, she heard footsteps in the hallway. The man appeared, with the same firm posture as the night before. "We have much to discuss today," he said, looking her in the eye. There was a mixture of authority and compassion in his voice, something that made her both curious and apprehensive. He led her to a bright room where books and paintings adorned the walls. The atmosphere was calm, but carried an air of purpose. "This place isn't just a home," he explained. "It's a refuge. Here, no one is alone." His words fell on her like a bomb. The girl looked around, lightly touching the polished wooden furniture. Every detail seemed designed to convey peace. She felt small in the face of such a different world, but at the same time, a part of her longed to believe she could belong there. The woman came in with a basket of clean clothes. "We've picked some for you," she said. The pieces were simple but new, smelling of fresh soap. The girl clutched the fabric to her chest, overcome with emotion. It was the first time she had clothes that truly belonged to her. After changing, she was led into the backyard. There were other children playing. Laughter filled the air, and she stood motionless for a few seconds, watching the scene. She didn't know if she could approach. The fear of rejection was still burning in her mind. The man, sensing her hesitation, said softly, "Everyone here knows what it's like to need a fresh start." These words awakened something inside her. It was as if, finally, she was no longer alone in her pain. Perhaps she could try to reach out. One of the girls in the group ran up to her and took her hand casually. "Do you want to play with us?" The invitation was so simple, but to her it felt like a door opening. Her heart warmed in a way she couldn't explain. She began to run along with the other children, and the sound of her laughter echoed through the garden. It was shy, but genuine. The man watched from afar, with a silent look of satisfaction. Something in him told him he was witnessing the birth of a new chapter in his life. After the game, everyone sat in a circle. The woman brought out a weather-beaten Bible and read a passage about trusting in God. The words spoke of new beginnings and new paths. The girl listened attentively, sensing that the words were directed at her. The other children shared short stories about how they had gotten there. Each had faced their own pain, but now they had found hope. The girl remained silent, simply listening. It was hard to believe that perhaps she, too, had found a place of belonging. At lunchtime, the table was set again, laden with hot dishes. This time, the girl didn't hesitate as much. She sat among the other children and felt part of something bigger. It was as if, little by little, she was rebuilding her sense of family. The man then said a prayer before the meal, giving thanks for every life there. His words were simple yet powerful. The girl closed her eyes and, for the first time in a long time, felt she could give thanks too. A thread of faith was rekindled within her. That afternoon, the woman showed her the small study, filled with colorful books and materials. "Here you can learn, dream, prepare for the future." The girl ran her fingers through the pages, enchanted. She had never imagined she would have access to something like this. She felt a mixture of joy and fear. Could she learn? Did she deserve all these opportunities? But deep down, something told her this was just the beginning of a long journey of discovery. As she walked through the hallways of the house, she noticed frames of old photos. Smiling faces, moments captured in time. Each image seemed to carry a story of transformation. The girl wondered if one day her face would be there too. Late in the afternoon, she was taken to the garden to tend to the small plants. The man explained that each seedling needed patience and care to flourish. "That's how we are too," he said. The girl fell silent, reflecting on those words that seemed like metaphors for her own life. She placed her hands in the soil for the first time. He felt the moist texture, the fresh scent. Something so simple awakened a sense of purpose in her. As if caring for those plants was also caring for herself, for her hope. The children joined her in the garden, teaching her how to water and prune. Little by little, the girl realized there was room for everyone, that she didn't need to compete for attention. There, everyone had value. There, she could flourish. As the sun began to set, the sky turned orange and pink. The girl sat on the lawn, silently observing the beauty. The man approached and said, "Home isn't just a place. It's where you feel loved." Those words stuck in her mind. Back in the room, the woman brought a softer blanket to warm her. "You deserve rest and peace," she said with a smile. The girl hugged the blanket, feeling the emptiness in her heart slowly being filled. But despite all the welcome, the girl still had questions. Who was that man really? What motivated him to open the doors of that house? And, above all, was this home truly permanent or just a temporary shelter? As the night wore on, the moon illuminated the garden outside. The girl closed her eyes, knowing she was safe, but still harboring a burning curiosity. Something inside her told her there was much more to be revealed about this new home. And, amidst the silence, she realized, the real journey hadn't even begun. What was to come would change not only her life, but also that of the mysterious man who had taken her in. The girl was already beginning to feel like she belonged there, but some nights were different. In the silence of the room, when everyone was asleep, the past came back like a movie she couldn't turn off. Images of cold, hunger, and loneliness invaded her mind. She huddled under the covers, trying to push away those memories. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't forget. The past had left deep scars, wounds that wouldn't heal easily. Her heart still held fear and uncertainty. One morning, while helping the lady fold clothes, the girl let out a heavy sigh. "Is everything okay, dear?" the lady asked tenderly. The girl hesitated, but only responded with a shy nod. It wasn't always easy to talk about what hurt. The man, noticing her constant silence, decided to approach. "A home isn't just for eating and sleeping. It's also a place to open your heart." His words sounded like an invitation and a challenge at the same time. The girl looked away, uncertain. Later, in the garden, one of the children asked her where she had come from. The girl's face paled. Her eyes filled with tears, and she chose to flee in silence. The simple question had opened a hidden wound, difficult to face. That night, the man found her sitting by the window, staring at the moon. "Don't be afraid to tell your story," he said softly. "Sometimes sharing your pain is the first step to healing." She remained silent, but her soul trembled. The next day, while reading the Bible, a passage about the psalmist crying out to God in the midst of pain touched her heart deeply. She saw herself in that story. How could someone so ancient have felt exactly what she felt? The memory of her mother began to emerge, as if from deep within her. She remembered her sweet smile and the prayers they said together. But she also remembered the day everything changed. The tears fell silently, unnoticed. Finally, on a rainy afternoon, the girl found the courage to speak. It was just her and the woman in the room. With a trembling voice, she explained that she had lost her parents very young. Her mother had left first, leaving only memories. Her father simply never returned. The woman hugged her tightly, without asking any questions. There was no need. That gesture was enough to break through some of the pain the girl was carrying. It was the first time she felt someone truly cared about her story. However, she still harbored deeper secrets. Moments of abandonment, nights when she begged for food and received only indifferent glances. Telling everything seemed impossible. The fear of being judged kept her back. The man realized there was more to her than she was revealing. "You don't have to say everything at once. The heart has its own timing." His words felt like relief. For the first time, she understood there was no need to rush. But the dreams returned every night. She dreamed of dark alleys, closed doors, and voices that ignored her. She woke up sweaty, with her heart racing. It was as if the past insisted on haunting her, even when she was in a safe place. One morning, the man heard her silently crying and entered the room. He sat beside her bed and simply held her hand. He said nothing, and that shared silence was the most powerful gesture she had ever received. Over time, small memories began to slip into her conversations. She spoke of a lost doll, a song her mother sang, a warm soup made on cold nights. Each memory brought both pain and hope. The man listened patiently, as if he knew that every detail was a piece of her soul. Sometimes his eyes would well up too, but he hid it. Perhaps because he carried his own hidden pain. One day the girl asked, "Why did you help me?" The man took a deep breath, as if keeping a secret. "Because I saw something in you that reminded me of what I've already lost." The words hung in the air, charged with mystery. The answer raised even more questions. What had he lost? What hidden pain connected those two stories? The girl remained silent, but something inside her told her there was more to be revealed. During an afternoon of play, one of the children showed her an old album from the home. Leafing through the pages, she found photos of other foster children. Some faces were happy, others serious. Everyone had been transformed there. But in one particular photo, she noticed a detail, a familiar face, almost like the man's younger self. Beside him, a smiling child. Who could it be? The image sparked even more curiosity. Night fell, and the girl couldn't stop thinking about that photo. The man seemed to carry a story as complex as her own. Maybe that was why she'd stopped her car that night. Maybe the two of them were more alike than she realized. She looked back at the moon through the window and whispered a prayer, "God, help me understand what is happening." She felt that her life was intertwined with that man's in a way greater than she could comprehend. The next morning, finding the man in the living room, she wanted to ask about the photo. But before she could, he changed the subject, leading her to another activity. It was as if he wasn't ready to talk about his own past. The mystery deepened. Now it wasn't just about the girl's pain, but also about the secrets the man kept. They both had hidden wounds, and it seemed fate had brought them together for a greater reason. In that home, the past was slowly being confronted. But the shadows were still there, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. The girl's heart pounded with the certainty. Her story was just beginning to be told. And deep down, she knew that the next revelation could change everything she thought about this place, this man, and even herself. In the following days, the girl began to realize that the man's every gesture carried more than simple kindness. He wasn't just offering food or shelter, but something greater: time, attention, and presence. This confused her, because she wasn't used to such dedication. One morning, he invited her to walk in the garden. As they gazed at the flowers, he said, "Generosity isn't about giving what's left over. It's about giving what's valuable." The girl fell silent, reflecting. That phrase seemed to hold a hidden meaning. He showed a small tree he had planted years before. When the seed was buried, it seemed insignificant. But today it gives shade and fruit. The metaphor fell upon the girl like a lesson. Perhaps she was that seed, growing slowly under care. At lunchtime, the man served food to all the children, leaving no one behind. With each dish placed on the table, there was a smile and a word of encouragement. The girl realized that she wasn't the only one receiving attention. Everyone was treated as precious. During the meal, a child asked, "Why do you do all this?" He smiled, took a deep breath, and replied, "Because someone once did it for me." Silence fell over the table. No one dared ask more, but everyone's curiosity grew. The girl felt that answer connected to the mystery of the photo she had seen. The man seemed to carry a debt of love, something that motivated him to offer the same care he had once received. This awakened in her a mixture of gratitude and unease. One rainy afternoon, he gathered all the children in the main room. He told a simple parable about a traveler who, upon finding a lost orphan, decided to care for him as if he were his own son. "When we care for the little ones, we care for the very heart of God," he concluded. The words touched the girl deeply. She remembered her mother's prayers and how much she believed that God never abandons those in need. Suddenly, everything seemed to make sense. Perhaps this man was an answer heaven had sent her. Later, when they were alone, the man handed her a small notebook. "Here you can write your thoughts, dreams, even fears. No one has to see them if you don't want them to." The girl held the gift carefully, as if it were something fragile and sacred. That night, before going to sleep, she wrote her first sentence, "Today I feel like someone really cares about me." Her heart felt lighter, as if each word she wrote was a step toward healing. The next day, the man found her in the garden and asked, "What do you desire most?" The question surprised her. She considered answering food or clothes, but realized she already had those. What she truly desired was something deeper: family. She didn't have the courage to say it out loud, but the man seemed to understand from the gleam in her eyes. "One day, you'll find you're no longer alone," she said with conviction. The words stuck in her mind like a silent promise. Time passed, and the girl realized her trust in him was growing every day. Even so, an invisible barrier remained. Something in her feared it might all end suddenly, that it would only be temporary. The man seemed to sense this fear, but he didn't force anything. He believed that true generosity doesn't pressure, it just offers. Therefore, he never demanded anything in return. He simply gave, silently, like someone planting seeds without expecting applause. This way of acting began to teach the girl the value of kindness. One afternoon, upon seeing another child crying, the girl ran and hugged her, repeating exactly what the woman had done to her. At that moment, she realized she was already learning from example. Generosity was multiplying within her. The man, watching from afar, smiled with satisfaction. He didn't need to say anything. He knew that the greatest fruit of his generous heart was seeing each child learn to be generous as well. The cycle continued, silent and powerful. During a nighttime reading, he highlighted a biblical passage that said, "There is more happiness in giving than in receiving." The girl sat in silence, pondering how that made sense. Perhaps the happiness she saw in him stemmed from this very principle. She began to notice details. The way he got up early to take care of the house, the way he always listened to the children's stories without rushing, the way he never let anything go uneaten. Every simple gesture revealed greatness. One special morning, he took the children to a local hospital, where they gave clothes and toys to other children. The girl was moved to see that there were many children like her. There, she understood that generosity knows no bounds. Back home, she asked, "How do you manage to help so many?" He smiled and replied, "Because I don't do it alone. God gives me strength, and every smile I receive is a reward." The answer left the girl silent, reflecting deeply. One night, she dreamed of her mother saying, "True love spreads like light." When she woke, she realized that was exactly what this man did. He illuminated dark paths, not just for her, but for everyone around her. But deep down, the girl still wondered, why her? What was it about her that made him stop that black car on that cold night? This question echoed in her heart like an unanswered mystery. The man seemed to harbor something deeper, something he hadn't yet revealed. It was clear his generosity was rooted in some pain or ancient memory. The girl sensed she would soon discover the truth. Meanwhile, each day in that home reinforced a silent lesson. Kindness transforms not only the receiver, but especially the giver. This discovery ignited in her a new desire to also be someone who could transform lives. Late one afternoon, gazing at the sunset, the man said, "When you sow love, you reap eternity." The girl didn't fully understand, but she felt the weight of those words. There was something bigger going on here, something yet to come. And so, as his generous heart revealed itself in small gestures, the girl realized that her life was no longer the same. But there were still secrets hidden, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. At first, everything seemed like a dream to the girl, a soft bed, plenty of food, gentle voices all around. But as the days passed, the weight of adjustment began to set in. Her heart was still gripped by the fear of suddenly losing everything. Sometimes, when she heard laughter in the hallway, she thought they were laughing at her. Her past rejection still spoke loudly in her mind. It was hard to believe that she was now part of a home where everyone accepted her. Insecurity was a constant shadow. During meals, he took a long time to serve himself. She was afraid the food would run out or that someone would judge her for wanting more. He noticed this behavior and patiently encouraged her to trust him. But overcoming years of distrust didn't happen overnight. One morning, when she saw one of the children receive a hug from the woman, the girl felt a tightness in her chest. A silent jealousy invaded her. She wanted that affection all to herself, but she was afraid of appearing ungrateful. Her heart was waging a secret battle. The man noticed her sad expression and approached. "Love is not divided, love is multiplied," he said calmly. But for the girl, this was still difficult to understand. Inside her, there was a wound she feared would be forgotten once again. At night, in her room, she cried softly so no one would hear. It wasn't sadness about being there, but fear of losing everything. The trauma of abandonment still haunted her. Each day of happiness seemed to be accompanied by a question, what if it all ends tomorrow? At her home school, her adjustment was also slow. While other children read aloud, she cowered, afraid of making mistakes. The fear of judgment outweighed her desire to learn. The woman patiently helped her take small steps. One day, after flubbing a word, she heard some innocent giggles. To others, it was just a joke, but to her, it was devastating. She felt back on the streets, invisible and fragile. She ran to the garden, crying silently. The man found her sitting on the grass, hugging her knees. "Mistakes are part of the journey," he said, sitting beside her. "Even flowers need rain to grow." The metaphor sank deep into her heart, but the fear was still there. She began avoiding some group games, preferring to keep to herself. She didn't want to feel inferior to the other children. The woman noticed her withdrawal and approached her gently. "Honey, no one here is perfect. We're all learning." Little by little, the girl began to realize she wasn't the only one with insecurities. Other children had their fears too. Once, she heard a boy confess that he had nightmares every night. She realized she wasn't alone in her pain. One afternoon, during a conversation circle, the girl managed to share a small detail of her past. It wasn't easy, but the other children listened to her respectfully. No one laughed, no one judged her. It was the first time she felt truly accepted. Even so, relapses happened. At a dinner party, when she heard a plate fall to the floor, she flinched in fright, as if she were about to be scolded. But instead, everyone laughed lightly, and she simply cleaned up the mess. The contrast left her confused and emotional. The man, noticing these reactions, knew that her adaptation would take time. Wounded hearts are like broken vases. They take time to mend, but they can shine even brighter once mended. He said this with conviction, as if he were also speaking about himself. The girl began to treasure every word he said. At night, she wrote in the notebook she had received, "Maybe I won't be broken forever. Maybe I can blossom here." That sentence marked the beginning of a small inner transformation. But the challenges continued. During a game, one of the older girls wrongly accused her of cheating. Her heart raced. Memories of accusations and rejection came flooding back. She almost gave up on everything right then and there. Before she could flee, the man intervened. No one points fingers here without hearing both sides. He defended her chance to speak, something she had never done before. The girl, her voice trembling, managed to explain herself. And for the first time, she felt justice. These small experiences were shaping her confidence. There was still insecurity, but now she knew she didn't have to face it all alone. Little by little, the girl discovered that adaptation was less about change and more about allowing herself to trust. Faith also played an important role. During a prayer night, the woman read about how God welcomes orphans and gives them a home. The girl wept silently. She felt those words were directed especially to her. After that night, he began to pray in secret. He didn't ask for wealth or comfort, just the strength to believe that home was real. That it wasn't a dream about to disappear. Each prayer was a thread connecting her to hope. The man, sensing her inner struggles, never pressured her. He simply offered his presence. Sometimes it was enough to sit beside her in silence. Other times, a word of encouragement. This patience was what kept her from giving up. The girl was still afraid to trust fully, but she was already beginning to smile more easily. A shy smile, it's true, but full of sincerity. And each smile was celebrated by the woman and the other children as a victory. One day, while helping in the kitchen, she dropped a glass and broke it. Her heart sank, expecting a scolding. But the woman simply laughed and said, "Don't worry, dear. Glasses break, hearts don't need to." That phrase stuck with her like a bomb. Even with all her fears, the girl felt something inside her changing. Each day, the wound seemed less painful. As if the love of that place were stitching her soul together, stitch by stitch. But there was still something unsolved, the mystery of the man. He was generous, patient, welcoming. But behind every gesture, he seemed to harbor a silent pain. And this aroused both curiosity and apprehension in her. The adaptation was underway, but not complete. It was a process full of ups and downs. The important thing was that, each day, she allowed herself to believe a little more. Still, she knew that great challenges still awaited her. And, amid these discoveries, he sensed something extraordinary was about to happen. A miracle that would change not only his adaptation, but the entire course of his life. It was an ordinary morning, the sky clear blue and the gentle wind swaying the trees in the garden. The girl was helping the woman water the flowers when the man approached. "Today I want to take you somewhere special," he said, with that mysterious tone he always carried. The girl was curious. Her heart pounded, a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Each day seemed to reveal something new, as if there was always a surprise in store. Little did she know that this day would be unlike any other. They got into the black car, the same one that had stopped in front of her on the cold street weeks ago. Now, however, the vehicle no longer seemed so frightening. For the girl, that car was a symbol of a new beginning. But there were still secrets to be revealed. The road was peaceful, lined with tall trees swaying in the wind. The man kept his gaze fixed on the road, while the girl observed every detail through the window. She felt she was heading towards something greater, even without understanding what it was. Suddenly, the car slowed. Ahead, a small crowd gathered around a van parked on the shoulder. The man stopped the car, worried. The girl looked out the window and saw a scene that made her breath catch. An elderly woman lay on the ground, surrounded by distressed people. Some tried to call an ambulance, others just stared, unsure of what to do. Despair hung in the air, and the girl felt a chill run down her spine. The man quickly parked and ran toward the fallen woman. The girl hesitated for a moment, but decided to follow him. Her heart was pounding, as if she were about to witness something far greater than she could have imagined. The man knelt beside the woman and took her hand. He spoke calmly, asking her to take a deep breath. "It's going to be okay," he said with conviction. The girl watched in silence, impressed by how he conveyed reassurance amidst the chaos. The ambulance would still be arriving some time, but the man didn't lose his composure. He said a soft prayer, asking God to give the woman strength. The gesture caught the attention of those around him, who instinctively began to quiet down as well. The girl, overcome with emotion, closed her eyes and silently repeated the same prayer. He couldn't explain why, but he felt an unexpected peace. It was as if, in that moment, an invisible force was present, calming not only the woman but everyone around her. Suddenly, the elderly woman slowly opened her eyes. Her breathing, previously shallow, began to stabilize. A murmur of surprise ran through the small crowd. "She's getting better," someone said, their voice breaking. The girl brought her hands to her face in disbelief. It was as if she had just witnessed a miracle before her very eyes. Her heart was racing, but not with fear now, with hope. Something powerful was happening here. The man remained calm, asking the woman to remain lying down until the ambulance arrived. When paramedics arrived, they found her conscious and more stable. "It was the hand of God," someone in the crowd murmured. The girl couldn't take her eyes off the scene. For the first time, she saw clearly what faith put into action meant. It wasn't just about words, but about presence, courage, and trust in something greater. In the car on the way home, she remained silent for a few minutes. Until finally, she spoke. "You really believed she would get better, didn't you?" The man smiled slightly and replied, "When we surrender to God, we don't need to doubt." These words remained engraved in the girl's heart. Everything she had witnessed seemed to confirm the promises her mother had always repeated: God never abandons the little ones. Now, she herself was witness to divine care. That night, she couldn't sleep right away. She replayed every detail in her mind: the fallen woman, the despair, the prayer, the transformation. It was impossible to forget. Something in her had changed forever. The miracle wasn't just what had happened to the old woman, but also what had happened inside her. The girl discovered she could believe again. That faith wasn't just a distant memory, but a living flame. The next day, he told the other children what he had seen. They were all enchanted, listening intently to every word. Some even became emotional, as if they could feel the power of the moment without being there. The woman hugged the girl tenderly. "This is the kind of experience that strengthens the soul," she said. The girl smiled shyly, but deep down she felt it was much more than that. It was as if she had been given a new life mission. The man silently observed her excitement. He knew that day had been pivotal for her. More than any lesson or advice, what he had witnessed was proof that faith and love could change destinies. But within him, there was also a weight. The miracle along the way had rekindled memories of his own history, of times when he had also received unexpected help. The girl didn't know it, but that event had deeply affected him as well. She kept wondering why she had been chosen to witness something so extraordinary. But instead of fear, she felt gratitude. It was as if God was showing her that life had something much greater in store for her future. That night, before going to sleep, he wrote in his notebook, "Today I saw that God not only listens, he answers." His writing trembled, but his heart was firm. For the first time, he felt part of something divine. The miracle along the way hadn't just been about the elderly woman. It was also about the little girl, who needed a sign to believe she wasn't forgotten. And now she knew, with absolute certainty, that she wasn't alone. But as he drifted off to sleep, He didn't realize that this miracle was only the beginning. There was much more to be revealed about the mysterious man and the paths they would yet travel together. Time passed, and the girl was no longer the same girl who had begged for food in the cold streets. Her eyes, once dull, now shone with a new light. There was a hope in her face that no one could extinguish. The other children noticed the change. She no longer hid in corners or avoided conversations. Little by little, she participated more in games, study groups, and even prayer times. Fear was being replaced by confidence. One morning, the woman asked her to read a short passage from a book aloud. Her heart raced, but this time she didn't flinch. With a trembling voice, she read every word. When she finished, she received applause. Her shy smile filled the room with tenderness. The man observed each progress with a discreet look of pride. He knew that transformation came not just from shelter or food, but from the discovery that it had value. Silent love was the true agent of change. The girl began to dream. She wrote in her notebook desires she had never dared to have: learning to play the piano, visiting the sea, having a future with purpose. Each written word was like a seed of faith planted in the fertile soil of her new life. But the transformation wasn't just internal. It was also reflected in her actions. When a younger child fell in the garden and cried, the girl rushed to help. She knelt, held his hand, and said, "You are not alone." It was as if repeating the words she had once received. The woman was moved to tears when she saw the scene. It was proof that the girl was blossoming. She was no longer just someone who received help, but someone capable of giving it. Generosity was beginning to multiply through her. During dinner, the man told a story about how hope can change destinies. The girl listened attentively, but this time not just as a spectator. She felt part of this larger narrative, as if her own life were a living testament to this truth. Each day, her faith grew stronger. She prayed sincerely, not just asking, but thanking. "Thank you for this home, thank you for this love," she wrote in her notebook. It was a profound transformation, from despair to gratitude. Nights were no longer filled with nightmares. Dreams were now colorful. She saw herself running through open fields, laughing alongside other children. She woke up smiling, as if the future had finally become possible. One afternoon, the girl was given the opportunity to plant her own seedling in the garden. She chose a small rose bush. "Just as I am growing, so will she," she whispered. The man smiled, touched by the natural metaphor coming from her mouth. The garden became her favorite place. There, she felt peace. Each drop of water watering the rosebush was like a silent prayer. She saw in the plant a reflection of herself, fragile at first, but destined to flourish. The man began to entrust her with more responsibilities. He asked her to help the younger children, to run the library, to lead small tasks. And she accepted with joy, feeling she could contribute. Her life was no longer just about receiving, but also about giving. The woman, in an intimate moment, said, "Darling, you are becoming a light in this place." The girl cried when she heard this. Never in her entire life had anyone told her she was important. Now, the transformation was visible even to others. One night, during a meeting in the living room, the man handed her a small Bible. "I want it to be yours. May each page be a guide on your journey." The girl hugged the book to her chest as if it were the most precious gift she had ever received. She began reading passages every day, underlining phrases that spoke of hope and purpose. Each word felt like it was written for her. The emptiness that had once filled her heart was being filled with a living, renewing faith. One day, while visiting the hospital again with the other children, the girl surprised everyone by singing a soft song beside a sick child's bed. Her voice was simple, yet full of emotion. Everyone fell silent, touched by the purity of that gesture. The man felt tears well up in his eyes as he witnessed the scene. The girl who had once begged for bread now offered hope with her own voice. The transformation was so clear it seemed like a miracle in progress. "Back home," she herself admitted, "before, I thought I was worthless. Now I know God made me for something special." The sparkle in her eyes was proof that the past no longer held the same weight. The transformation also brought courage. In a conversation circle, she finally shared part of her story with the other children. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. Her words inspired silence and respect. For the first time, she felt strong sharing her own pain. The man, moved, simply said, "Your past doesn't define who you are. Your courage does." The girl kept this phrase in her heart as an eternal mark. It was the perfect summary of her transformation. Every step was different now. Even her posture had changed. She walked upright, smiled more often, and looked people in the eye. It was as if she had found a new identity, a new reason for existence. The children began to seek her out for advice or simply to be near. Without realizing it, she had become a role model among them. The love she received was spreading, taking deep root in that home. The lady commented to the man, "It's amazing how quickly she blossomed." He just smiled, but deep down he knew that this transformation was also an answer to his own story. Sometimes the girl still had relapses, painful memories. But now she knew how to face them. She would run to the garden, open her notebook, or pray silently. She no longer felt weak, but strengthened. She was a fighter for hope. At sunset on a special day, he sat near her rosebush, now full of buds about to open. He gently touched the leaves and whispered, "We are growing together." She felt connected not only to the plant, but to life itself. And so, the transformation continued. The girl was no longer marked only by hunger and abandonment, but by faith and courage. But destiny still held something greater, the legacy she would leave not only there, but far beyond. The years began to pass, and the girl was no longer seen simply as someone who had been rescued. Now, she herself had become a beacon of hope. Her smile lit up the house, and every act of kindness was a reminder of how much she had grown. The man watched silently, ever proud, yet still discreet. He knew that true legacy isn't built with grand speeches, but with daily actions. And the girl, without realizing it, was already leaving her mark on everyone's hearts. One afternoon, a newly arrived child was brought into the home. Shy, with a frightened look, she looked very much like the girl from before. Without waiting for instructions, she approached, took her hand, and said, "You are safe now." The cycle was complete. The woman wept quietly upon seeing the scene. It was living proof that love received multiplies. The girl who had once needed shelter now became sheltered. Home had fulfilled its mission in her life. At school, her dedication drew attention. Teachers began to notice her writing talent. The notebook, once a keeper of secrets, now became a space for inspiration. She wrote stories about faith, courage, and new beginnings. The man encouraged each word. "Write as if you were planting seeds. Someone will one day need to harvest the fruit." The girl understood. She wasn't writing just for herself, but for everyone who would one day feel what she had felt. During a reading afternoon, she was invited to share one of her stories with all the children in the home. Her voice, firm and sweet, captivated everyone. When she finished, silence was followed by warm applause. It was more than a reading, it was a testimony. The faith that had previously been only whispered now became a declaration. She spoke openly about how God had changed her life. Not in an imposing way, but naturally. Like someone simply sharing something that overflowed from their heart. One day, the home organized a visit to a local church. There, the girl was invited to give a brief testimony. She simply recounted how she had been found on the street, hungry and forgotten, and how her life had changed since then. Many people were moved. After that day, other families offered to help the home, bringing food, clothing, and support. The girl's testimony had awakened compassion in many hearts. The love she had received now spread in waves. The woman told her, "You are like a flame that lights other flames." The girl smiled, but deep down she understood the responsibility she carried. Her painful past had not been in vain. It now served to illuminate the paths of others. The man, in an intimate conversation, confessed, "The greatest gift I've ever received was watching you blossom." She was moved. She realized she was not only transformed, but also part of his transformation. Love had healed them both. In the garden, her rosebush finally bloomed red. The children called it the Tree of Hope. She tended the plant with special care, always remembering how she had compared its growth to the process of healing itself. When new children arrived at the home, she would take them to the rosebush and say, "Just like this plant, you too will bloom." Each word sounded like prophecy, like a promise of a better future. Her legacy wasn't limited to the home. In her small visits to the community, her presence was remarkable. Ordinary people were inspired by her story and realized that it was never too late to start over. One day, while visiting the hospital again, she ran into the elderly woman who had survived the car accident. The woman recognized her and smiled. "You were there, weren't you? I remember your eyes full of faith." The reunion was emotional. The girl understood, in that moment, that the miracles she had witnessed were part of something greater. They were not coincidences, but chapters in a story written with purpose. And that purpose now passed through her as well. The man constantly reinforced, "Love is the only legacy that never dies." With every gesture, the girl confirmed this. She didn't need wealth or titles. Her greatest treasure was seeing lives touched through her. At home, everyone recognized her as an example of resilience. Whenever someone felt discouraged, she was the first to approach, offering a hug, reminding them that there was hope. Her simple presence was synonymous with comfort. The woman said, "You have the heart of a shepherdess. You guide people with tenderness." The girl was embarrassed, but she knew that somehow it was true. God had shaped her to care, just as she had been cared for. One day, she found the man looking at the old photo on the mantelpiece again. This time, he decided to speak. "That was my brother. He was the one who taught me to care for others. When I lost him, I promised I'd do the same for anyone in need." The revelation left her silent for a moment. Now she understood the root of his generosity. It was a legacy of love that had spanned generations and pain. And, in a way, she was now part of that legacy. The bond between them grew even stronger. It wasn't just about rescue, it was about family. She had found a father figure in him, and he had found in her the chance to honor the memory of the one he had lost. The home grew, not only in number of children, but in love. Each new life welcomed was a new opportunity to multiply hope. And in each story, the girl became a living witness to the fact that miracles do happen. Over time, she was no longer just the girl found on the street. She was now remembered as the young woman who taught about hope. Her name became synonymous with faith and resilience within that community. Her complete transformation was consolidated in the impact she left on others. She was no longer just a recipient of kindness. She was a channel of love, faith, and change. Her difficult past had become the stage for her mission. In the silence of her room, she wrote in her notebook, "My life is proof that God turns ashes into flowers." This phrase would be read by many children later, becoming the family's motto. Words born of pain were now seeds of hope. The man knew he was witnessing the birth of a legacy that would never fade. It wasn't about walls or riches, but about transformed hearts. And the girl, now a young woman, was the greatest living proof that love is the most powerful inheritance. And so, amidst laughter, tears, and new beginnings, the legacy of love continued to spread. But there was still so much more to be experienced, because every great story always holds new chapters waiting to be written. And so, this journey showed us something greater than just the story of an orphan girl. It reminded us that true love isn't measured in pretty words, but in gestures that transform destinies. That even in despair, hope can be born where least expected. How many times have we felt invisible, as if no one saw our pain? And yet, a small action can change everything. A smile, a word of encouragement, a gesture of compassion. Isn't that exactly what the world needs more of? This girl's life is a mirror for us. She invites us to believe that wounds can become scars of victory, that abandonment can transform into acceptance, and that the past doesn't define the future. Have you ever felt something similar in your journey? And if you were in her shoes, what would you do? Would you have the courage to trust again? Would you open your heart to receive love, even after so many disappointments? Questions like these lead us to look within and realize how much we also need new beginnings. The greatest lesson here is simple and profound. When God writes a story, He turns tears into seeds, and those seeds blossom into new beginnings. What seems like an end can be just the beginning of something extraordinary. Now I want to know from you, what would you do if you met someone in the same situation as that girl? What would your gesture of love be? How would you like to be remembered, for what you accumulated or for what you transformed in the lives of others? If this story touched your heart, Remember that every detail was designed to inspire change. And if you want to continue walking with me through stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of the next chapters of hope we'll share.